Hi, folks, and today I thought I'd talk to you a little bit about the long run and specifically whether or not you might be putting too much emphasis on this arguably important run. Now, I should start by saying that, like with anything in running, there are tons of opinions about the long runs. So I'm going to give you some of that I've kind of landed on to adopt as opinions that I have and go through that. But getting back to the long run, so most people are going to get their long runs done at all costs, especially if they're training for a marathon. By gosh, nobody wants to miss a long run. It's just they feel it's critical, and it is important to get those long runs in. We do put, rightfully so, a lot of emphasis on the long runs, but as I said, sometimes maybe we put too much emphasis on the long run. So let's look really quickly. Why do we do long runs? Tons of reasons. A few big ones are your capillaries and mitochondria get built up. That's how you get food and oxygen to the muscles. Your heart, specifically the left ventricle, becomes bigger. It's able to pump more with every single pump, get that blood through you more efficiently. And it helps you learn how to metabolize fat as a fuel source. Other reasons as well, those are three biggies. So let's take a little bit more look at the long run. So typically they're done at a conversation pace where you can talk, sing a song. They're usually very easy. They are typically going to be 90 minutes to up to 3 hours in length. Now you'll notice I wrote 2.5 hours underneath that. So 90 minutes to 3 hours with that 2.5. Here's why that's important. So those examples I went through earlier about the mitochondria, the capillaries, your sweet spot starts at 90 minutes for that. So when the run is shorter than 90 minutes, even though you might call it a long run, it's not really a long run from a standpoint of getting those benefits. At 2.5 hours, those benefits, the physiological benefits, start to really drop off, and by 3 hours, they are done altogether. So normally, your elites are very rarely going to run much more than about a 2.5 hour run, which for them could be 20, 22, 23 miles at the pace they're doing. And the reason for that is because they're saying, hey, why do I want to go out and run longer than I'm getting a physiological benefit for? And certainly by 3 hours, they're gone altogether. Now, I'm not saying you should never go out and run over 3 hours, because if anybody's out there say, oh my gosh, my marathon time is 5.5 hours, I've got to get out there. I'm not saying you should do that, but be aware that after 3 hours, you're really not getting any physiological benefit from that whatsoever. And as long as you're aware of that, that's all fine. So 90 minutes to that 3 hours. Long runs typically, or technically really, only need to happen about every 9 days. Now again, people say, wait a minute, I do a long run every weekend. Well, pretty much the reason you do one every weekend is most people don't have a schedule that allows them to do a long run every 9 days because they've got work, other family obligations. They can't say my long run is going to be Monday this week and it's going to be on Wednesday next week and it's going to be on Friday the week after that. So we tend to put them in every single weekend because it's really easy on the calendar. But honestly, if you get 3 every 4 weeks, you're kind of in that 9 days. They don't need to be every single weekend. And then finally, here's another big one. Ideally, your long run is not going to be much more than 25 to 30% of the total mileage you run for a week. Again, right away people go, oh my gosh, I would never get to a 20 miler for my marathon if I didn't do that. You know, certainly depending on how much time you have during your week for total mileage, you're going to blow past that 25 to 30%. But realize that that's kind of still the goal, is where you'd like to be if you could. And you want to try not to be breaking that too much, because total mileage for a marathon is every bit as important as the long run. So you've got to be able to balance all that. So how do you know if you might be overemphasizing your long run in your training? So first of all, if the bulk of your weekly miles are coming in that long run, I think you're putting too much emphasis on the long run. So if you're consistently seeing a long run running, 45, 50, 55% of all your miles, I'm going to tell you, I think that's too high. You've got to get some other type of running in as well. Your training is going to be too skewed towards just that, and there's other things you need to get in your training as well. So the bulk of your weekly miles are coming out of that. I think you're overemphasizing your long run. And then finally, if you are sacrificing, move the right hand, sacrificing other runs for the sake of the long run. So what do I mean by sacrificing other runs? Here's what might typically happen with somebody, is that in the week leading up to a 3.5 hour long run, which is already longer than I think most people need to be out, but again, maybe you can be out to 3.5 hours. So what you typically do in order to handle that 3.5 hour long run, you skip any harder runs you have during the week leading up to that, because you want to have the energy to be out there for 3.5 hours, which makes perfect sense. But then the next week, you're a little bit too drained from that 3.5 hours to do anything harder. So what happens is, especially again in marathon training, you've given up all other workouts the week before and the week after just to get that run in. Should that never happen? Again, not what I'm saying, but just ask yourself, if you're skipping those harder runs and doing those, and you're doing that a lot, I think you're probably starting to overemphasize the importance of the long run. So as I said, the long run is very important. The long run does matter, But so do the other so do the other runs in your training matter as well. So as you're looking at your training, make sure you're not putting too much emphasis on the long run.